Oh boy, is this exciting. We just finished 2 full parts of this flow. Now, not everything is hooked up together yet. That still needs to happen. But we have the user, we can get the credit card in, we can get the Stripe token. And now our checkout screen looks like it's ready to integrate with a payment flow. Okay, so how do we go about building that payment flow? Well, that's what the next series of videos are going to be about. And the reason that we've constructed the Stripe integration in this way, where I'm showing you this really, really detailed flow diagram, is because payments are hard. Payments are inherently a hard flow. You really, really need to break things down. And I admit, even though this diagram is here, it can still be quite difficult. Don't worry about that. But what I will admit to you is, anytime you run into a complex scenario, building a graph like this to just explain it and break it down really comes in handy, and it's something that is vital on the job. So remember that. Now let's go look at how we're going to build out this payment flow. I always think to myself when I build a feature, hey, how difficult is this really going to be? And anytime a checkout flow is thrown at me, I kind of get excited because they're so difficult. Like, sure, we're decomposing this into a simple way, but to be honest, payment flows are one of the most complex things you may run into. And in this particular scenario, we're giving you the grassroots implementation of one that you can build upon, that you can make more complex, that you can add and remove from, and all of that good stuff. And that makes me excited. Now over here, our UI is built to the extent that the credit card information can be filled in. But we want to add some more zhuzh to it, right? We want to zhuzh it up, if that's a term at all. We want to make it prettier and more nice. But in any case, over here, after the list section, we have our total. And then we have a spacer and our credit card input. But we want to add some more interactivity here. Again, zhuzh it up. Now, in order for us to do that, what we need to do is also implement the name input, right? Because in the credit card component, we need to take in the name of the person. Right now, we just hard-coded it, but let's get rid of that. So let's go back to our checkout screen and let's figure out how we're going to get that name input going. So the first thing we'll need is we're going to need a name over here, name and set name. And that's going to be equal to use state, and we're going to give it an empty text, right? That's what we're going to input here. And the reason that we're going to do it that way, well, actually, let's give it null. Let's not even give it a value at all. And so the reason we're going to do that is because right here, before credit card input, we're going to build something called a name input. And that name input is going to be very important because if we do not have a name, we're not going to show the credit card input. We're going to hide it until you fill in a name. That's going to give it a little bit of, you guessed it, zhuzh. Oh God, I'll stop now. But it's going to make it a bit more interactive and a bit prettier. So now that we know that we're going to build name input, where's that going to come from? Well, it's going to come over here from our components in the styles, checkout styles. And the name input in checkout styles is going to be very important to us. So right over here, what we're going to do is build out export const name input, and that's going to be equal to a styled text input. And what we're going to give it is kind of a nice margin around it. Let's go ahead and grab margin, and let's say props, and we'll say props dot theme dot space, and let's say 3. There we go. Where's text input going to come from though? Well, that's going to come from React Native Paper. You guessed it right. And so now if we go look at our checkout flow, there we go, a nice name input. But why isn't our name hiding? Oh, well, we have to make sure that we have a name value, not have a name value. Okay, so the logic is important there. So now if I fill in Mo, is it going to show? Oh, but yeah, well, we haven't really added any interactivity to it, of course. So how would that work? What is that going to look like? First of all, let's give the name input a label, and let's call it name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say the value is equal to name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say on change text, we're going to get some type of text value, right? And we're going to call that t. And then we're going to say set name to t. And so now we've linked the name input into our set name. And that means now when I fill in Mo here, anytime I fill in anything, oh, text strings must be rendered with a text component. That's not good. That means that when we delete our name, right over here, it's breaking. So what we need to do is we need to say over here, if t, right? So if text.length, if t.length, otherwise, we're going to set name to null. And by doing this, what we're going to enable ourselves to do, right here, I seem to have a small issue. There we go. Let's do this and that. And then let's put this here. There we go. So we're going to say over here in onChange text, if the text has a length, set the name to the text, otherwise set it to null. And this will allow us the following. If we add this to cart, we fill in Mo here. Now it's going to show. But if we delete, it's going to hide. And that's because we're setting the name to null. In this case, what it was setting the name to over here was this. And if you set the name to an empty string, well, now this is going to break. Another way to get around that is, for instance, we could remove this logic completely, right? And what we could do up here is we could say set name by default to an empty string, and then here if name.length. And that way, now if we go look, must be rendered with a text component. So let's do greater than 0, and there we go. Add. And if we put Mo here, now it's going to show. If we remove it, it's going to hide. Mo, no Mo. Mo, no Mo. Mo. There we go. So we have the interactivity there for the name input. Next up, we're going to link this back into the credit card input. So we're going to say name is equal to name. And now when we fill in a credit card input, we're going to get the name that we fill in to this field to come into the credit card input. So if you fill in Mobini, Mobini is going to come into the credit card input. Okay, so now that we've made it here, next up, we should look at how to process the payment, what that button is going to look like, and how to clear the cart. Now that we're able to process the name of the person that's going to pay, what we want to do next is we want to set ourselves up to be able to pay and also to handle error states as well as clear the cart. Now, first off, I want to create some more space between this name input and the actual credit card input because I feel like they're too close together. And by doing that, a bit more breathability here, don't you think? Now, next up, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add two buttons. We're going to add a pay button and we're going to add a clear button. And you guessed it, these buttons, they're going to come from the styles file. Pay button, clear button. So what we want to do with these buttons is basically we want to enable ourselves to render out the proper kind of interaction for the user. So let's do export const pay button. And we'll do that equal to a styled of type button. Now that button, of course, coming from React Native Paper is going to be the button we'll be using. And what we're going to do with that pay button is we're going to set the attributes ahead of time, so some props. And what we're going to set is we're going to set the color to colors.brand.primary. And then we're going to set some particular styles on it. What we're going to set first is we're going to set the width to 80%, right? And so by doing that, what you can see here is, well, colors, first of all, isn't defined here. So let's go ahead and import colors from, and then let's say ../../../ infrastructure, theme, colors. There we go. And if we go over here to checkout and we added something to checkout, oops, the clear button hasn't been defined. So let's go ahead and take that. Let's say clear button over here. And for the clear button, we might want to use colors.ui.error because we want it to be a little bit less flashy. So if we add to the special over here and we went to our checkout screen, well, we're missing something. Nothing is showing right now. Well, of course not, because we're not really rendering anything. What we want to say here is clear cart, and then we want to say /clear button. And over here, we want to say pay now, or rather pay, and let's say pay button. And if we do that, pay and clear. Okay, great. So now we can do something along the lines of what we've done so far, which is we'll set mode equal to contained on them. And you could do this on the attributes as well. I just prefer to do it right here. It really doesn't matter. So what you can see over here is that the pay button and the clear button are on the screen now. Now we want them to align a bit more. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let's do align self center on both of these, right? And so they'll center themselves. And then next up, what we need to do is we need to give them a little bit of padding. So let's take this margin and let's do padding instead. And then let's add the same padding over here. Now 3 is a bit big, so maybe we should go with something a little less on the nose, maybe a 2. 2 feels a little bit more spacious. That looks pretty good to me. Now if we add Mo here, they're a bit close to the input as well. It's a bit much. So what we can do is we can just add, a couple of spacers here, right? If we do this, still a bit close. That's a bit better. Maybe a little more. There we go. That feels good. So maybe we should add a new type of spacer. Extra large maybe? Well, if we go into spacer, we can kind of see what we need to do in order to achieve that. And so for us to be able to achieve a different type of spacer, what we can do is we can say extra large is 4 and extra large is 5. And by doing that, now we've created the proper amount of space between the buttons and the input. But we still need some space between these two buttons. Now, maybe not an extra large, but maybe just a regular large. And doesn't that look good? Now, you could go ahead and wrap this around the clear button. Again, in order to allow yourself the ability to see it when you are debugging the UI. And so now that we have these buttons in place and we're able to pay and clear, well, what should the clear button do and what should the pay button do? Well, first of all, let's take it a step back. Let's add some icons to these because it would look nicer with icons. Let's say icon is equal to cash USD. And over here in the clear button, let's say that the icon is equal to cart off. There we go. That looks a bit better. And then one more thing we need to do is we need to add the ability of on press. And so on press, I want to clear the cart here. So we'll take in clear cart from the cart functions over here. And on success, well, on press, I really don't have anything I can just do yet, right? I can console.log success, right? Or I really don't have my payment, right? Or it's like pay now is rather what it is. So if I order the special, right now this is console logging, this clears the cart. If I order again, clear the cart. If I order again, and so forth and so forth. So now we kind of have everything more or less set up to start building out, first of all, the on press for the payment function, and also some light error handling if that comes into play here. Now, for the next portion, I'll be focusing on the payment flow first, and then we'll come back to error handling.